Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Preventive Medicine Podcast. In this episode, we're doing something a little bit unique and something that we haven't really done. But first, if you guys are brand new to this podcast, then first off, thank you for joining and clicking on this episode. We hope you find some value in it and hope you enjoy it. If you do enjoy it, make sure to go check out the rest of our episodes because we think we have a lot of really good episodes that you could probably find beneficial if you found this one beneficial. And if you're returning, welcome back. We appreciate your continued support. With that being said, this episode, I'm going to be talking with one of our team members, Jonathan and Alessi, kind of about weight loss because the idea behind this is that weight loss is something we talk about in a lot of our episodes, and it obviously has tremendous benefits given the right context. So both of us have lost a significant amount of weight. So we're just going to kind of dive into that. But first, let's get this intro. Overcoming saber-toothed tigers and woolly mammoths, we must now face a new enemy, ourselves. With the rates of diseases such as heart disease, stroke, diabetes, depression, and many others ballooning, we must find a better solution to these modern epidemics. Welcome to the Preventive Medicine Podcast. We believe in building a foundation of health by means of prevention so that you can build the life you want and find fulfillment with no barriers. Hear from experts around the country on how to take your health into your hands. Take control and build a foundation of health for the life that you want to live. And now, here's the show. Hello, everyone. So we are here with Jon Alessi, who is a member of our podcast, I guess. Jon, you've been on the show before. I guess you just want to give a quick intro again, just to give people a reminder of who you are.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on again. My name is Jonathan Alessi. I'm a medical student at IU School of Medicine. I'm in the MD PhD program, so I'll be in medical school for another 5 years or so. Long trek. And I powerlift for fun. And in the context of this podcast, I've lost a significant amount of weight that happened about 2 or 3 years ago. So. Yeah.
Definitely. And as I was telling Jon before this episode, this is a little bit different than our traditional format, I guess, because typically it's me interviewing someone. But in this one, we're kind of just going to have a conversation. Jon's going to ask me questions. I'm going to be asking him questions. We're just going to talk about it and hope you guys can find some value in the content that we're going to be discussing. So I guess the first thing I'm going to ask you, Jon, is you wrote an article for our website actually called "Can I Be Healthy Without Weight Loss?" Can you talk about that article a little bit and kind of, weight loss as a benefit in preventive medicine?
Yeah. So the idea for this article came from my sister, actually. So my sister was asking do I really need to lose weight in order to be healthy? Can I be healthy and not go about losing weight? She was kind of reading some of these books like Health at Every Size, that basically talk about this idea that, we can be healthy and be at, very different sizes. So I kind of wanted to get into the literature around that and see like what the actual evidence says. For the most part, that is true. Like you can be heavier, have some excess adiposity and still be healthy. That being said, I think that there are a lot of situations in which losing weight can be extremely beneficial. Like when we think about the benefits of weight loss, I think Ragav and I are pretty similar in our view on preventive medicine and why preventive medicine is important to us. And a lot of it has to do with what I'm going to call affordances, which is a term that I'm stealing from some work done by Peter Stilwell and Sabrina Connick's. And it's this idea that like our affordances are those things in our world that we feel that we can interact with, right? So before I lost weight, and this also has something to do with fitness, but I was unable to do things that I wanted to do, right? So like Ragav just ran a marathon and that's something that I want to do now, but that I never would have even considered before. It wasn't something that I thought that I could even potentially do. And so when we think about weight loss and preventive medicine, I think the most important thing, the biggest benefit that we can get from it is having this ability to think of ourselves as people who can do whatever it is that we want to do.
Definitely. And with that being said, sorry, I'd say lunch. With that being said, I can also say that you don't necessarily have to lose weight. You don't have to be like a 160-pound person to run a marathon. I currently weigh, to be like frank, transparent, I weigh 235 pounds. I competed in my last powerlifting meet in March at around 235 pounds. I didn't lose any weight during my marathon training, and I was okay. Sure, I probably would have been a little bit faster and maybe had a little bit less impact on the joints at a lighter weight, but I was still able to do it. So the affordances are kind of stealing your word now. It's based on what you want to do at your level. So if there is something that you're being limited by, then definitely the goal of preventive medicine is to help you get to a state physiologically, mentally, wherever you need to be so that you can do those things. So that's kind of the idea behind it. But with that being said, weight loss does have tremendous benefits. And I guess kind of the marker that we use in medicine for being a healthy weight is BMI. Now, in like fitness circles, BMI is often given a bad rep because everyone says, oh, BMI is a terrible measure because if you have muscle, it's going to throw it off. However, in the general population, BMI is still a very useful measure. And when you start using it with waist circumference, which when you build adiposity around like the central part of your body, kind of like the belly, the hips, that area, it becomes super useful. And we find in the data pretty consistently across the board that all health markers tend to improve within a healthier BMI range. So that's kind of where this idea of weight loss helps, especially if someone is at a higher BMI, not necessarily due to being a bodybuilder, stepping on the Mr. Olympia stage for those people who have like BMIs of 40.
Yeah, my favorite part of the BMI debate, and so I powerlift, and so a lot of people, you hear BMI is bad because it catches people who are heavier because of muscle mass. And in reality, BMI has a really high specificity and a really low sensitivity, meaning that it's actually really likely to not catch you if you do not have obesity, right? And I think that's always really funny to me. Is it's actually the opposite. Is so like the failings of BMI are actually the opposite of what is usually thought. So it's more likely to, yeah, be less sensitive and miss people who it's going to miss people who do have excess adiposity.
Yeah, this is why I refrain from getting to sensitivities and specificities because I trip myself up and then I sound like a fool. So I never really talk about those. But you're a little bit more better. You're better with those than me because you're PhD background. So I'll leave that. I'll leave that to you. But so moving on with this, both of us lost a significant amount of weight, and relatively we were able to keep it off. But I want to touch on and ask you, why is weight loss so hard? I know we've talked about this in several podcast episodes, but kind of from your perspective, why does weight loss seem to be so hard for so many people?
Yeah, I I would say basically the deck is stacked against you. Is kind of like why is it so hard? Every thing that we have no control over is kind of against us in this desire to lose weight, right? So obesity happens as a consequence of our physiology interacting with our environment, right? And so our environment right now, the term that is used in the literature is the environment's obesogenic, meaning that there are lots of ways to overeat and to eat very highly palatable, or so highly palatable being like really tasty, delicious, rewarding foods that are very high in calories. And on top of that, our world, it's become much more difficult to engage in like high amounts of physical activity because we have things like cars and uh, you know computers and all of these other things. And so basically, at every turn, kind of uh, the environment is stacked against you, and then on top of that, your physiology is also saying, we don't want to lose weight. Your physiology, when you start to lose weight, starts to shut things down to make it uh, more difficult for you to lose weight, and then also increases your hunger drive. Um, so yeah, basically the deck's against you. I don't know. What do you? What were your thoughts on this, Raga?
I mean, that's essentially what I was going to say. That's been echoed by all of essentially our podcast guests, where at every step of the way, it's kind of against you in anyone's drive to lose weight. From the personal standpoint, it comes from like the food environment that we're all raised in as children. A lot of times we don't have like the ideal quote unquote environment. And a lot of times we are in an obesogenic environment, especially for those in lower socioeconomic areas where they might not have access to exercise as easily or healthier quote unquote foods. So it starts then. So sometimes we don't even have control of it when we're children. And then you grow up in that environment that's kind of all you know. As you were saying, the physiology stacked against you. If you do try to lose weight, then you have these counter regulatory measures that say, hey, what's going on? I don't want to lose weight. Because throughout our evolution, we're kind of programmed to keep weight on in case something happens, in case there's like a sudden drought, sudden famine, whatever happens, we're kind of programmed to keep the weight on. So that's the physiology aspect. And then also, like you were saying, even if someone's out of a socioeconomic environment where it's more difficult to maintain a healthier weight, even then we have fast food everywhere. We have convenience everywhere. Amazon will deliver whatever you want to your door. Uber Eats will deliver whatever you want to your door. It's difficult to exercise. And even in cities where typically you would get out, walk, and be more active, even that's becoming more difficult these days, just because I guess things come to your door now, so you don't really need to go anywhere anymore. And then people are moving to suburbs, urban sprawl, where things get further and further apart as people move. So now you go in a car instead of biking places, you don't walk. Overall, it's very difficult. We're not going to get even more deeper into it, but weight loss is really hard. So this
Yeah.
is why I decided, or I wanted Jon to come on this podcast and both of us kind of talk about our journey with weight loss. So Jon, how much weight did you lose and over what period? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So I just want to go back to the previous
Yeah,
question
sure.
really quickly. So the other thing that I'll mention here is stress is another like
Oh,
really
definitely.
important thing that drives food intake, right? So I'm a neuroscientist, and when we have mice and we stimulate the parts of their brain that make them really like stressed out and anxious, they like impulsively start or compulsively start eating food, like massive amounts of food, and will put on a lot of weight. Um, and this is also true. Like when you see stressed out people, a lot of time they also put on weight.
Give me
And
that ice cream and
yeah,
all the
we
chocolate when you're
we,
stressed.
we happen to live stressful lives. So yeah, that's another way that that can kind of have the deck stacked against you. But in terms of my weight loss, I lost approximately 90 pounds. I believe was the like um, most recent, and it took me. So I believe, and when I say 90 pounds, I'm kind of estimating because I was in a headspace where I would never have weighed myself. You know, like that would have been really hard thing for me to do. And so I never weighed myself. But my senior year of college, I looked very heavy. I have pictures, and I think, like, just based on estimates, I was probably like 265, 270. And so that's where the 90 pounds is coming from. And so it took me from the end of college. I moved to Mexico, where my only mode of transportation was walking or using a bus. And I also kind of like changed my lifestyle a lot when I was down there. I, ate a lot less. There was a lot less alcohol in my nights in college. And so I lost a fair amount of weight just from like being in Mexico. And then after that, I went through the first year of medical school. And after my first year of medical school is when I really started like lifting and getting interested in like health and nutrition. And that's when I lost another 50 pounds around. Um, and so I guess the 90 pounds took me 3 years or so to lose.
Got
Something like
it. So
that.
what do you weigh right now? If you don't mind me
Um,
asking, by the way, this entire episode is going to be we're going to be frank and transparent with you.
yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah. So I weigh 180. I am in the 183 or 83 kilo weight class in USAPL. I honestly would like to go down to a 74 kilo weight class. But yeah, it just hasn't been in the cards recently.
Sure.
Um,
And if you have an estimate on your BMI, what would you say right now? I know we
I
don't
think
really
it's
track it that
26.
easily.
I think it's like 26, something like that,
Got it.
26 and a half.
Okay. So I think mine was actually pretty similar in terms of the magnitude of weight loss. So my weight loss started when I was a junior in high school. So at that point, I actually did weigh myself because I decided it's time to lose weight. And I was like, I don't know, quote unquote, real with myself. So I wanted to see what my starting point was. So from my memory, I was in the upper 250s. I believe at some point I reached 260 because I weighed myself after I started like exercising, losing a little bit of weight just to feel maybe a little bit better about myself. So I'd say I reached around 260 pounds, and this was when I was like still 5'8", 5'7", somewhere around there because I hadn't hit my full growth potential or whatnot. And then over the period of my junior year of high school, senior year, and then freshman year of college, I came down all the way to about like the high 160s, like 168, 169. So around 90 pounds as well. And I guess that's over about 2.5 to 3 years as well. So we have very similar trajectories there. Um, a lot of what I did, I guess we'll talk about that, like methods and whatnot coming up. But right now, I guess to compare, I weigh 235. So I weigh only 25 pounds ish less than what I did at my maximum. However, my body composition has significantly changed. I put on a fair amount of muscle in that time. I would estimate right now my BMI is between like 32 and 33. And I will say that I'm carrying a fair amount of fat mass right now. Um, I can't say like I'm good with it. I feel great. I feel healthy. All of my numbers have been fine, but I would say my body fat percentage still is around like probably close to 20ish%. So I have a little bit of work to do there, but I'm happy where I am right now. So um, let's get into the methods now. So you said you kind of changed your lifestyle when you moved to Mexico. Did you use any specific methods, or was it kind of just like an overall lifestyle change?
Yeah. So I when I moved to Mexico, the intention wasn't really like I wasn't necessarily trying to lose weight, right? Like I just went from one lifestyle, which was living life in college with all my friends that I had around, and I had a car and I was on college campus, and
Mm-hmm.
so I really didn't like walk a whole lot. My college campus was small. Um, and then moved to Mexico where just getting to work, I had probably had to walk like 30 minutes a day, which is right there meeting physical activity guidelines. Um, and I also had less opportunity to like socialize, and I just ate these really hyper palatable foods a lot less often. Um, so yeah, I guess changing my environment and the context that I was in is probably the most important thing in that sense. Um, the real like intentional changes came later when I started lifting and
Mm-hmm.
exercising, and then um, yeah, trying to get involved in nutrition and health more generally. And that's when I really said that I want to lose weight, and I think uh, the important things again that I did there, which uh, you know um, I very intentionally changed my environment to make it easier for me to lose weight. Right, so I did things like I um, didn't have any food in my apartment at the time. I was living in Indianapolis, doing a 2 month long lab rotation. And this was a time where I still had a house in Terre Haute, but I had to live in Indianapolis. And so I uh, didn't really have access to a lot of like my normal apartment house type things. So I couldn't really like cook with the apartment that I was in. And so I didn't have any food in my apartment whatsoever. I ate out every meal. And I like limited the times when I would eat, right? So I stopped snacking, and I said, I'm going to eat during lunchtime and at dinner time. And those are the only times that I'm going to eat during the day. And that was, I would go to like very specific restaurants where I knew that they would have food that I uh, both liked and was met my like standards for health that I came up with. Um, And then I also had like I pre-made plans. So when I felt that I was like getting hungry and the times that I told myself that I wasn't going to eat during, um, I would like go take a walk. Um, and then also during this time, I was also uh, beginning to work out. So I started I went to the gym 3 times a week during this time. Initially 3 times a week, and then 5 times a week after the first month. Um, yeah,
Definitely. I would say it sounds like the key for you was changing environments and putting yourself in a position where your environment kind of didn't force food on you in a way, where you were in Mexico, obviously out of the States where things maybe are more hyper palatable and easier to access. So that was huge for you. And then after that, you're kind of in an apartment where you don't have food. And we all know you get munchies at some point, and it's just hard to stop eating when you get a pack of Oreos. You can't just eat two. You always end up eating a sleeve.
yeah,
Sounds like the environment was huge for you.
yeah. I think
Um,
most
Go
people would
ahead.
be very surprised by how much of a difference it makes just putting food in a cupboard, like just making it so that it's not visible. I
Yeah,
think most people would be really surprised at how much that
that's kind of the
difference.
concept of friction. I know when people think about like getting work done, like the productivity world, they try to reduce friction as much as possible so that you can get work done. For example, if you're filming a podcast like what we are, instead of kind of having to put everything together from scratch, you have a studio ready, so you don't have to do any of the busy work. You kind of just sit down, press record, and you're good to go. So it's very similar with weight loss, where instead of kind of having all those foods easily available, just sitting on the counter, now you put them away either behind a cupboard, you put them in like some sort of Ziploc or whatever those plastic containers are with lids. So now it's harder to get to them, or you just don't have them in the house at all. So now you either have to walk to the store to get them, you have to order them, just all these different steps. So it definitely helped for you.
Yeah, I've never heard of friction as a term for that before, but
Oh
that's really
yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, so increasing the friction for food, decreasing the friction for productivity is kind of
Yeah,
the way to put it. My story is a little bit different than that. So I started in high school, and in high school, misinformation and just whatever else is rampant. So my journey started with Googling how to get a six pack. And obviously, when you Google that, you're not going to find some evidence based material, especially back then. First, so you're going to find some clickbait, whatever it is. So I started off with the 6 meals a day and working out like an hour and a half every day to try to lose weight. And I also did not have a really good understanding of what food is because my parents obviously cooked most meals for me. So I didn't really know the nutritional contents of food. So kind of whatever he was saying, I would eat. So for example, and I was also vegetarian. So this is kind of a funny example. If he would say you have like 6 ounces of pasta with like some grilled chicken, instead, I would just have 6 ounces of pasta, and that's it. That would be one of my 6 meals. And then you'd have like the 5 almonds and a protein shake, and that would be one of my meals. So kind of fell for everything there, but I did see results because right away you limit a bunch of calories. If you take whatever diet you were on and then you go to some sort of more restrictive diet, whether or not it's optimal, quote unquote, whether or not it's healthy, whether it's the right way, if you restrict calories, you're going to lose weight. So I did see some benefit there. I started working out right away. So I started increasing a little bit of muscle mass. And when you're a newbie, when you're just starting, you're more than likely going to increase muscle mass, even if your nutrition isn't right. You're not eating enough protein, quote unquote, because it's a new adaptation. Your body's kind of ready for it. So it started out that way. And then eventually I started researching more and more of like how to do this because I'm a relatively inquisitive person. I was interested in the sciences. So from there, I started finding more evidence based YouTube channels, started reading more articles, reading more blogs. And then I realized, oh, there's something to this calorie counting thing. So then I started using MyFitnessPal. And I think MyFitnessPal was the key for helping me lose weight as it kept me accountable to a certain number of calories every day based on whatever my goal was. So I essentially just had MyFitnessPal as my Bible. It was my food Bible. If I went over if I went near my calories, I was done. That's it. It didn't matter if it was at like 1 p.m., 2 p.m., or if it was at like 10 p.m. I just stopped eating after, no matter how hungry I got. So that was kind of the way that kept me accountable. And I kind of used that throughout the entirety of my weight loss. And I think I started somewhere, if I can remember correctly, I don't remember the top number. I think I started around like 2,600 calories. And by the time I ended, I was eating like 15 to 1,600 calories, which obviously is not necessarily enough for, I don't know, whatever activities you want to do, but that's where I got to. I'm not saying you have to eat that amount. I probably shouldn't have said a number to begin with, but that's where I ended up. And then I guess that was it. And then throughout that entire period of 2.5 to 3 years, I just read as much as I could, learn as much as I could. So my exercise programming got a lot better. I got into powerlifting my freshman year of college and started learning a lot more about that, about effective programming. So everything just kind of started coming together. However, my food choices at this time were still just the cafeteria. So within those calories, I was still just eating whatever I could find, I guess. And it was a little bit more difficult as a vegetarian. So a lot of that would be just like slices of pizza, and I'd estimate the calories and I'd try to fit it within there, but that would be it. I wouldn't really focus on fruits and vegetables and things, just calories are king. And that's kind of where the bulk of my weight loss came from.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it's really cool how different our initial weight loss kind of the way that we did it, the way we went about it was, and we were both successful. And so I think, and this is true, in the scientific literature as well, that there are a lot of ways to go about losing weight. And I think finding the one that's best for you is, yeah, the best thing, right? So like, there's not one for every single person.
Definitely. And I think that that is one of the biggest things to realize when it comes to weight loss is that when you find all these people on YouTube, read these blogs, they have their one particular method and it sounds like that's the only one that's going to work, but it's not. There's so many methods out there, as you were just saying. Just whatever works for you and your lifestyle is probably the best. We want to take a quick break to remind you that this podcast is not intended for medical advice and is for educational and informational purposes only. We also want to remind you of our Instagram page at PreventPod, where we share various content relating to each episode that you can share with your friends if you enjoy our episode. And lastly, don't forget to sign up for our mailing list so you know right away when an episode goes up at www.thepreventivemedicinepodcast.com. And with that, let's get back into this episode. All right, so we kind of talked about the magnitude of our weight losses and kind of the methods that we used. We talked about the overall success of, I guess, our weight loss and the magnitude from going to around top weight at 260 to like 170-ish. What failures did you have during that time? Was it completely linear? Did you have a period where like you rebound a little bit and then got back with it and then came back down?
No, yeah, absolutely. It was not linear at all. This is one of my favorite things to talk about in terms of weight loss is kind of a lot of people, especially when they start losing weight, they get really discouraged by their first, hiccup. And yeah, I mean, this is also another thing with like my kind of mental process going through weight loss was especially at the beginning, I was really fearful that I was going to regain weight. So like every pound that I lost, I was very afraid that I was going to regain it. And I remember I went on vacation pretty soon after I started losing weight with my friend who kind of introduced me to health. And I remember I was like afraid. He made like a pancake breakfast or something. And I was like, I can't eat that. And he was like, just eat it, man. And I still think about that a lot. Like that was very formative for like just kind of like relax, this is a process that's going to take, Ragav and I both took 3 years. But yeah, no. So it was definitely an up and down process. I think I made it about 3 months and it was relatively linear. Although there were like, small fluctuations in my weight, of course. And then at about 3 months, I kind of started to like plateau. I think at this point I was like 205, 210. And my goal at this point was to get down to 185. And this was in my transition back to, so I was in Indianapolis at the beginning of my weight loss, and then I moved back to Terre Haute. And yeah, trying to transition back and then also be back in this social environment where, these people knew me as somebody who was not super involved in like trying to maintain my weight and eat healthy and all of these things and trying to like reintegrate myself and establish this kind of like new identity. That was definitely like difficult. But after a little while of kind of, asserting myself and kind of sitting down and intentionally trying to figure out, how do I go about doing this in a way that is healthy. Uh, I figured it out and kind of got through it. Um, yeah. What about you? What
Definitely.
were your like major
I
hangups?
I was just gonna say I can see it's difficult when you kind of reintroduce yourself as a new quote unquote person. When it comes back to like family, friends, because everyone knows you as a different, like completely different person. Where, hey, do you want this bag of chips? Sure, I'll eat it. But now you're more conscious about that decision, so that's got to be a difficult period.
Yeah, no. So
Um,
I don't know about you. I was the person, like if somebody didn't finish something at a meal,
oh,
I'm
that
going to
was
come
me.
back.
Yep, right there. Same
That's
here.
my yeah. And so to kind of completely 180 that, it definitely takes some some fortitude,
Yeah,
I guess.
it's definitely an adjustment period. I did change as well like that. I think so. I guess going back to the beginning of this, my weight loss actually was relatively linear. I didn't really have a period where I had a significant gain. Obviously, there's going to be like fluctuations. When you subscribe to like cheat meal Sunday and you have like 20 pancakes in one day, obviously you're gonna have some fluctuations. But overall, the trajectory was like pretty steady and linear. However, I would say some of my biggest failures were more mental rather than like the number on the scale. And that was becoming just a very rigid person and personality where if it wasn't in my plan and it wasn't in my macros, it wasn't already thought out at the beginning of the day, I wasn't going to eat it. And if it wasn't easily tracked as well, I wasn't going to eat it. Like I said, my fitness pal was my Bible. So if it wasn't in there and if it wasn't easily logged, I wasn't going to eat it, which unfortunately included a lot of my mother's home cooked Indian food. Because how are you going to quantify a mother's cooking and put her into my fitness pal? You're not. So unfortunately, I became the person that didn't eat it and made all of my own meals, which in one hand taught me a decent amount of cooking because I started making almost all of my food. So I guess that was a good part of that. But the negative part is that my mother was like, "Oh, he doesn't eat my food anymore." Um, so that's it's a whole other issue. But I became a rigid person, which was probably my biggest failure.
Yeah,
I wouldn't say failure, but biggest downside.
yeah. I struggle with that as well, especially so going into so I started my weight loss in like June, and then kind of going into like the holidays and being around family again and all that stuff. I definitely, definitely struggled with like this kind of rigid um, idea of how I needed to eat, and I knew cognitively like it's okay for me to eat whatever, and I shouldn't. I should have this flexible dieting like approach
Mm-hmm.
because I had read all of that and I knew what should be done, but still I was so I remember I was so anxious and just so afraid of regaining weight. So by the time Thanksgiving came around, I think I was probably um, I was getting close to 185 because I had a meet coming up, and um, I just I was so afraid that like my weight loss was so fragile at that time. I thought that any like deviation, any small like one weekend binge, and I'd be back at 250.
Yeah,
And that's just not that's not how it works basically.
exactly.
And it took me. I had to after kind of developing more of a rigid style after prolonged dieting. I really had to take a few months where I did not think about what was going in my mouth at all. I ate whatever I wanted, and after a couple months of that, and really not seeing like a huge difference in the scale or on the scale, that's when I really started like trust myself and kind of um, allow myself to live.
Yeah, for sure. And that's one of the concepts that we talk about a lot of this podcast, which is kind of avoiding that rigid, healthy, quote unquote, mindset where you have to eat these certain foods, you have to exercise, you have to do all these certain, quote unquote, correct things to be healthy. That's not how this works. Being healthy is about being in a like body position, shape, mental space where you can do the activities that you want to while supporting and nourishing yourself. So if that means you're eating your mother's home cooked delicious Indian food, and it makes you happy, makes them happy, it makes everyone have a good time together, then you do it. If it means eating your grandma's cookies or just cake, celebrating someone's birthday, you can do that within a healthy lifestyle. So that's kind of what I evolved to, and it sounds like what you evolved to after some time. But definitely, it takes some time to get there because I feel you with the paranoia because you think the second I put this in, I'm going to lose control. I'm going to eat everything inside and become the vacuum again. And suddenly I'm going to balloon back up to 250, 260 pounds. I will say one of my failures though was after that linear period, I was in the idea of cutting and bulking. So I think you know where this is going, where that period was my cut. And then I was like, okay, now it's time to build some muscle. And then the idea behind the bulk, what people think when they don't have as much information, is that you just start eating and you just eat everything, but you're training. So it's going to become muscle, right? So I quickly ballooned up over the course of a year again from 170, high 160s, back up to like 230, 240 pounds. But this was a period where I did gain a significant amount of muscle because this was kind of the first period where I was in a surplus, quote unquote, while training hard because I had discovered how to actually train at this point instead of those random videos that you find on YouTube. So I did gain a significant amount of muscle, but obviously you can't gain that much muscle in a year. So I did gain a significant amount of rebound fat. So that was kind of my biggest quote unquote failure. And since then, kind of the entire period of college was in a sense yo-yoing, where I'd have these bulk cut cycles where I went to 240 and then I was like, oh, I'm going to get into powerlifting. I'm going to compete in the 205 pound weight class. So then I cut down to 210 pounds and then it'd be a maintenance for a little bit. And then I'd come back up to 230 pounds, just eating and trying to grow and whatnot. And that's kind of where, when I started medical school, is when I really transitioned to more of just like eating to support myself. And I never really had a period where I cut after that because I went from my last quote unquote bulk cycle of getting to like 230 pounds to kind of transitioning my mentality and trying to nourish myself and support myself for the activities that I want to do. So I've kind of been consistently around 230 pounds since then.
Yeah. What were you when you were bulking? Like your very first bulk, what were you doing? Were you like go mad or what was
Oh
your?
no, so oh man, so at our cafeteria we had unlimited food,
Oh,
and
that's
so we had breakfast, lunch, dinner, and there was oh, what was it called? I forgot the exact name, but it was essentially just like pre midnight, like what are like pizza, burgers, that kind of thing. It's ah, I'm blanking on this name. I feel terrible, but so that was like
pasta
a
sticks.
tradition,
Is that what
huh?
you're thinking of?
No,
Uh,
not, I'm talking about like the thing what they
okay.
call like that period of eating. So all
Oh,
the boys, we just go over there and we like chow down. So I was eating like a bunch of cereal and those kinds of things for breakfast, chugging protein shakes, and then for lunch it'd be whatever they had, I guess, as an entree that was vegetarian. And then I remember eating like at least 3 or 4 slices of pizza every single day because that was something that was readily available at the cafeteria that I could eat as a vegetarian easily. And oh man, I ate a lot of food that year. It was ridiculous.
yeah, yeah. I've never bulked, but we'll see if that ever happens in my future. You never
Yes,
know. Right now,
definitely.
I'm not interested, but we'll see.
I will say though that some of those bulk cycles are the reason where obviously when you're bulking you will gain some muscle mass, and I'll say over those bulk cycles where I did gain a significant amount, where I think when I cut down to about 160, like high 160s, I would say an estimate I probably have like 130ish, 140 pounds of lean mass somewhere, whereas now I would estimate I'm close to like 190ish pounds of lean mass, which would be pretty decent. So if I cut down to like 210, it'd be pretty lean at this point. So I will say that was a benefit of them, but it obviously is not the best thing when you just keep yo-yoing back and forth. At the end of the day, though, I think I still being like a plateau point, I guess, of 230 will still give me a weight loss of 30 pounds, which is pretty significant.
Yeah, yeah. So speaking of the yo-yoing, that's my the book Health at Every Size. That's one of the biggest issues that they bring up, and rightfully so, about dieting and diet culture. Um, and this is what we see a lot with people who diet, and actually, like what uh, Ragav did, it isn't really like what the like we would call like the bad way of doing this is. Usually, people will lose lots of weight and then gain more weight than what they had originally had. And you do that a few cycles, and all of a sudden you're like much heavier than you were at the beginning. And so that's one of the major issues that has been brought up as like a risk of potentially like weight loss. So keeping
Definitely.
that
I
in
think
mind.
I was very fortunate to avoid that rebound. And I
Yeah.
think one of the main drivers of that was kind of the performance aspect of it, of bodybuilding slash powerlifting. So I wanted to ask you, what was the kind of driver to keep you maintaining weight? Is there any specific goal that you're looking forward to, or is the goal to stay at that same weight?
Yeah. So I mean, I live a very different lifestyle now than I did in the past, and I really like the way that I live. And so just kind of maintaining that, um, I, I do want to maintain my weight. And so that is definitely a thing that I like, um, try to, uh, I aim towards that, like that is an intention of mine. I also, weigh myself, which is relatively correlated with weight maintenance and weight loss. But I think so. Like, if I am looking at the literature, and not just like from my personal experience, if I'm actually looking at the science, I think probably the most important thing to do to maintain weight is to exercise. This is what we see.
Yep.
So, exercise is not it's not super great at like if you just tell people to exercise versus not telling people to exercise to see who loses weight. But if you have an exercise wing in a study, they tend to maintain weight loss a lot better than people who don't exercise. Um,
Yeah, I think I talked about that exact study or whatever you're referencing in a podcast that is currently unreleased as we're recording this right now, but it'll be up, I think, in 2 weeks from this weekend. Where I was talking about how exercise actually isn't that great of a tool for weight loss. But when it comes to weight maintenance, exercise is king. And I think that's definitely one of the driving factors, it seems, for both of us that kind of kept us weight maintenance at whatever level. So my level ended up being around like between 220 and 230 pounds for maintenance. And I think the combination of exercise kept me there, as well as having the goal of trying to compete at the 220-ish pound weight class is where I think most of the time I know I want to stay around that weight because this is where I want to compete. If I get too heavy, then there'll be some big boys in there and I can't compete with those weights. And I don't want to have to deal with cutting down so much where I start losing a significant amount of strength. So kind of just try to stay around there right now. That might change in the future based on what I want to do right now, but that's kind of two of the biggest driving factors is kind of the exercise and the performance aspect and being competitive. And I think that the having that goal of something other than the weight, other than the number on the scale, is hugely beneficial. In our episode with Leah of Barbell Medicine, we talked about how her being in that weight class for her first powerlifting meet and setting that goal was kind of the biggest driver for her to start losing weight and for her to maintain that weight loss. So I think that same thing went for me of trying to maintain my weight class in powerlifting really helped me out.
yeah. I use that as a tool also. So I think I like very briefly mentioned this earlier a few minutes ago. But yeah, I did a powerlifting meet in December of my first year within this like weight loss. Um, and that trying to get down to that weight was definitely a really helpful like motivator of like I need to be 183 by December whatever. And I also, I didn't want to people in powerlifting if people aren't familiar with powerlifting or weight class sports, you might water cut before, and I didn't want to do that, and so I really wanted to make all of it like a fat loss, and so that was really helpful as well. I've heard Leah talk a few times about this, and yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
for sure. So if you guys haven't already listened to that podcast, go do so. Right now, I hope that was kind of sufficient talking about our history. John, is there anything else you want to say about your kind of history before we talk about present and going forward?
The one thing that I will say, I guess, I and I think this is common for a lot of people. I tried to lose weight a million times, right? Like, I don't know, I don't have a number on it, but I grew up in a family where, my father had been dieting his whole life since he was in high school. He dieted on and off. Both me and my sister have like basically always struggled with our weight. And, I think the first time I realized that I like needed to lose weight was like fourth grade or something like that. Cause I was, hefty. And or I think they called it husky at the time. I would buy like
Oh
husky
yeah,
pants,
that was me.
and so yeah, I did this a million times. And so what I want people to kind of know is, I didn't just try this once and it worked out for me. Like I uh, did this over and over and over again until I finally found, one way in the right circumstances that worked for me. And so I guess I would say, like, if this is a goal of yours, don't give up just because it fails, 5, 6 times. Try it the seventh time.
Definitely. And to add on to that, I want to say before we go forward, for myself, I lost 90 pounds, but then I regained like what, 40 or 50 of it. Sure, my body composition changed, but I still did regain weight. And it doesn't have to be like an absolute, you failed if you regain any weight. If you lose a significant amount of weight, you're more than likely going to gain a little bit back. That's just kind of how it goes. Your body will, at the end of your diet, say, okay, we need some actual food now. So let's say you lose 100 pounds. Regaining 30 or 40 or 50 is not the end of the world, because at the end of the day, you still lost a very significant amount of weight. And more than likely, that benefited your health or whatever you were trying to do or whatever your goals were.
Yeah.
So you don't have to feel bad about yourself because you regained a little bit of weight. It's still great. You're still in a much better position than you were previously, and you still accomplished something. And it's not like that one period is the only time you have in your life to lose weight. Unless you're like at the, I don't know, I don't want to say unless you're old, but at any age, you still probably have some significant amount of time left where you can chase other goals. Let's say I'm currently 26. I had this period in 3 years. I have longer ahead of me where I can, if I want to lose weight, I can do it again. So you don't have to feel bad about yourself for regaining weight either.
Yeah, exactly. This is extremely important. And not only, regaining weight, but also, both Ragav and I lost, 90 pounds, which is very rare, is what I'll say. Like, when we do studies of people losing weight by lifestyle, it is nowhere near that for the majority of people. The average is usually like, what, 5 kilos, something like that. And any amount of weight loss is really going to be beneficial, especially if you have one of these conditions that's associated with excess weight, right? So if you have type 2 diabetes, a 5 to 10% weight loss is extremely beneficial. Um, Dyslipidemia, which is like a high cholesterol for those who don't know.
Yeah.
Sorry. Um, for any of those conditions, even small amounts of weight loss is going to be beneficial. You don't need to lose 90 pounds.
Definitely. So where are you right now with kind of your practice, and how do you maintain your weight? What is your kind of, how do you structure your day where you're not kind of consistently, or are you consistently thinking about maintaining your weight every day? Or are you just in like a routine? What is your day like these days?
No, yeah. So I've made my food life as like streamlined as possible, basically. I eat the same breakfast every morning, and I eat very similar things basically every day. Is kind of what I'm trying to say. So, like, I have like a default setting where, like, this is what I'm going to eat today, and then if anything, if I want something else during the day, like, that's fine. Like, I'm not like rigidly adhering
Mm-hmm.
to this every single day, right? Like, I still go to Taco Bell every once in a while. But, like, yeah, for the most part, I have this like default where, like, uh, if nothing happens during the day, if I don't feel like craving for something or whatever, I'm just going to go straight. I have my oatmeal in the morning with some eggs, and then at lunch I have, I go to this like same station at the hospital. The hospital cafeteria has like
Mm-hmm.
various stations. I go to the same station and get whatever they have there that day, and then I generally have a protein shake about 2 hours before I lift. And then for dinner, I have, some protein, some kind of vegetable, like a leafy green vegetable, and a carb source. So like potato or rice or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, I've just made it like basically as easy as possible to kind of do that. And then also I have like a default kind of routine day where, uh, I go to work 9 to 5, I leave work at 5, and I go work out. And that working out is very helpful to my like adherence to everything around this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think I talked about myself with the MyFitnessPal and that being my Bible. So I do not use MyFitnessPal anymore, and I kind of told myself that I wouldn't track my food that like obsessively or that intensely ever again, just because I felt like it took a significant amount of joy out of what I was doing in the process of eating. So I think that food is something that we should also enjoy. It's one of those things that I don't know. I just think we should enjoy it. So I didn't want to really track that much anymore. So I will say that one thing that MyFitnessPal really did for me though was teach me the macronutrients of various foods. So now I feel like I have the ability to look at whatever food item it is and just kind of know intuitively off the top of my head what the macros for this kind of be, kind of how many calories this would have. So that helps me out a lot in navigating throughout my day where I can't say I generally function on autopilot like you, although a lot of my meals are very similar, but I do have a decent amount of like fluctuations in the day. I like to experience some variety from time to time. So I will say my base typically is for performance. So I think of whatever I'm doing in that day for whatever the lift is. If I'm going to be competing in powerlifting, or for example, if I was doing my marathon training, which I just finished. So I'd kind of structure my day around that and eat for that performance. So if I had a long run coming up on that, let's say the next day on Saturday, that whole day, I'd try to focus a lot more on carbohydrates and try to steer my dietary choices a little bit towards carbohydrates because you need those for a long run, and make sure I have adequate protein while keeping the fat a little bit lower. Just that's running nutrition things. Whereas if I was doing kind of more powerlifting stuff, I'd eat a little bit less carbohydrates because you don't necessarily need as much for powerlifting, but I kind of have more balance while making sure to consume enough protein. And then generally, I don't really stick to any specific like macro split. So I'm not trying to do like 40% carbohydrates, 40% protein, 20% fat. Kind of just eat. And I focus on trying to eat vegetables throughout the day. Typically, I try to eat some sort of fruit in the morning with breakfast because I think it fits really well with breakfast. Typically, I try to eat some sort of good vegetable source with lunch, vegetable source with dinner. I try to have quality protein with lunch and dinner. And then I try to fuel the carbohydrates around whatever the activity of the day is. So if I'm working out later, my lunch will probably be a lot higher in carbohydrates and my dinner might be a little bit lower. If I'm training later, other way around. So I kind of just swap it. I wouldn't say there's anything specific, but it really helps to have that training goal and that performance goal in mind for me to kind of structure my diet around.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting that you also struggled with counting, calories or macros or whatever. I did that for a little while as well, and yeah, just I basically found it just wasn't really like a healthy thing for me. It really I became very neurotic and like really yeah, just took the joy out of like eating food. I would have to like before I ate the food, you have to log it or whatever, and so eventually I just decided, I actually stole this from Alan Thrall. I do a serving of a protein, so whether that be fish, chicken, whatever, and then vegetables, and I eat as many vegetables as I want, as well as fruit. I do not care. Like
Same here.
I'm not worried about the calories from my like 3 apples or bananas or whatever that I eat. And then I also have besides that fruit and vegetable, I'll have some kind of carb, whether that be like mashed potatoes or mac and cheese or whatever sounds good. Um, but yeah,
Exactly.
I also could not calorie count.
Now, I will say that we're kind of making calorie counting sound terrible right now,
Yeah,
which both of us have potentially been scarred by it a little bit. I did it for like 3.5 to 4-ish years of my life. So I felt like I kind of graduated from that, quote unquote, but it is still a very effective strategy. It
yeah,
provides kind of a really objective measure of what you're putting in your mouth. So if you do want to do that, that's a very valid strategy. A lot of people still use it. And honestly, I've been away from calorie counting for quite a bit. And with marathon training, my kind of consumption of food in general went up quite a bit. So I might try calorie counting right now just to kind of re-get a baseline to know where I'm at, because I was probably consuming like 500 to 600 grams of carbs per day during my marathon training because I'm a bigger dude weighing 235 running for these long distances. I needed some food behind me to do
yeah.
that. And I didn't lose weight and I had a really short prep. So I just consumed a lot of food to kind of make up for that. And my weight stayed the same, which was great. I felt great during my runs. So I might come back to it for a little bit just to re-get a little bit of a baseline.
Yeah, no, there is absolutely no like nothing wrong with calorie counting or macro counting. I'm pretty sure if I remember from a previous podcast, Jason is macro
Yeah,
counting.
he's
Um,
still at it.
and yeah, it's just, I couldn't do it because it made me super neurotic. And if you find that happening to you, then yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. But otherwise, yeah, it works. I mean,
For sure.
tons of people have used that as a very solid method of losing weight. So
Exactly. So as we close this out, kind of, we don't want to kind of rehash this entire episode, but briefly, what would you give for advice for people who are planning on losing weight or currently trying to lose weight?
Uh, yeah. So first of all, if I would make sure that you are indicated for losing weight, basically. So if you have a previous eating disorder, I would not necessarily recommend that unless you're working with, a professional, multidisciplinary team. I would also not recommend losing weight if you're pregnant. Um, I would also, uh, yeah. So my recommendation, uh, if you have some other comorbidity associated, some other issue associated with weight, so that could be type 2 diabetes, or it could be high cholesterol, or it could be hypertension, and you are in the obese range, then I would definitely suggest weight loss. I think that's a great thing. Um, if that doesn't apply to you, if you are, maybe in the obese range or overweight range, but you don't have any issues, then it's more got to do with like, if you want to lose weight, then like that's
Exactly.
probably fine, but it doesn't necessarily need to happen from a health perspective. Um, Now, going into like actual how I would recommend that you go about doing it is, I really like what I stole from Alan Thrall, basically. So like uh, one protein, one carb, and some fruits and vegetables at every meal, basically. And then I also would recommend like not snacking. Snacking is pretty well correlated with weight gain, and so if you're bulking, then snacking would be awesome. But I really did really well with like kind of. Uh, I didn't know it at the time, but now I recognize it as like time restricted feeding, where I uh, said, this is breakfast time, this is lunchtime, and this is dinner time, and I'm not going to eat outside of those times. Um, and so I like that idea as well for people. And then um, also changing your environment to the extent that you can to make it easier for you. So this kind of reducing friction, or increasing friction, I guess, increasing friction to food, to access to
Yep.
food, and reducing friction to the things that you uh, want to do. Right. So
Yeah.
putting things in a cupboard, like even that is great. It's like I don't have any food out visible, whether it be like fruit or whatever. There's nothing visible in my kitchen. Um, yeah, those are my recommendations. I guess I
Definitely. And I
may
guess to add on
be
to that,
missing one, but
no worries. And to add on to that briefly, reducing friction for things like exercise, such as having your clothes already ready. If you're going to go to the gym after work, then having your gym bag or whatever you need already packed in the car, so you don't have to go home to take another step, then to go to the gym. So things like that, going along with the concept of friction. I think you really did a really good job kind of explaining everything. The only thing I'm going to add on to there is that there are numerous ways to lose weight. And if it is indicating you do want to lose weight, then also know that your method might not be the one that works for you if it's not working currently. There are other methods out there. Feel free to try them. And then the data out there shows that unfortunately, weight loss is not successful many times. And with that, I'm not saying that you're not going to be successful. Obviously, I wish that you're going to be successful in your pursuit. But what I'm trying to say is that more than likely, there will be some sort of failure in your path. And that one failure, quote unquote, or that one hiccup in your journey does not mean that you have to abandon it completely. A lot of times it takes multiple times and multiple approaches to lose weight, and we have time. It's not like there's one chance that you have to lose weight. You can do it multiple times. So if sometimes it doesn't work out, then that's completely okay. Try something else, switch gears. Know that you are not alone in this journey, and that a lot of people, the majority of people, will not significantly lose weight. So kind of understand that, take that in stride, and switch, pivot, try something else, because at the end of the day, it's all about you. We're not trying to lose weight for any specific like person or thing or whatever it is. You're doing it for yourself. So kind of understand that, know, and just pivot, be able to do that. Um, I guess that's all I have to add. Otherwise, you did a great job.
Yeah. Well, so I just want to add in. You made me think of this. I think something that's really important is kind of like taking the anxiety out of it and um, basically like not sweating the small stuff, right? So like worry about the things that really matter and don't worry about, like I didn't get, 160 grams of protein today. I got 158 or, those
Mhm.
kinds of like just small like details that, in my experience, have caused, like relative amounts of stress for me. I would definitely recommend just not worrying about that, like,
Definitely.
uh, and then also, yeah, so you were talking about this kind of like, you have tons of time. So don't worry about, especially in the first couple weeks, you might not see a huge change on the scale and, or in your, body, and just realize, like you got to set your expectations and kind of say, this is going to take, potentially it took us 3 years. This is a process, and you kind of have to find the joy in the process and really, yeah, try to uh, enjoy it and try to live
Yeah.
your life.
And keep that big picture in mind. A lot of times when it comes to these goals like weight loss, you kind of get lost in the minutia and the details and in the day to day. For example, not hitting your protein for that day. Oh no. Whereas take a step back, look at the big picture. As long as your overall trajectory is on the way that you want it to go, then that's great. You're on track. And if not, then that's also okay. Look at the big picture, see how much time you have, reevaluate, and you can continue going forward from there. Jon, I think this was a great podcast. It was relatively honest, I think, that we talked a lot about our personal stories. Thank you for sharing so much. I hope for our listeners back home, this was beneficial. I hope someone got some sort of value out of this. That's what we always try to deliver here at the Preventive Medicine Podcast. So thank you.
Sorry, can I add one more thing?
Yeah,
Just
go for it.
uh, I feel like I need to say this. So the if you struggle with this and you are within the obese category and you have, so your BMI is over 30, your waist circumference is over 40 for men, or over 35 for women, I believe, 30 inches, by the way, then you can definitely seek help from your doctor. We now have medications, and there are surgical options, and that is not a failure of any kind on your part, that you need those things, right? Like, I don't think Ragav or I use them, but that doesn't, that's not, doesn't mean that we're like morally superior or something. Like, this is a disease. I'm not like better than somebody who needs to take hypertension medications. This is just something that sometimes people need extra help, and so definitely see your doctor if that's something that you might be indicated for.
Definitely. Thanks for adding that in. All right. Thank you for coming on and joining me on this episode. And with that, we're out.